This is the non-tech podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am on Treaty Number 8 territory, the traditional meeting grounds and gathering places of our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 76 of the non-tech podcast. This is both Easter Sunday and also 420. So good on you and or us for partaking or not partaking. But giving us some recognition here, certainly in the moment, or even if we can try, if the technology permits us, going to be recording 2 episodes back to back this very evening / afternoon, and putting it through a sort of stunt production process wherein it comes out with the 65 episode, or 75 episode rather, but for this, and the 77 that'll be coming out after. And so doing them all at the same time as a bespoke and high quality, independent educational media enterprise such as this is capable of doing using basic technology. And I'm really glad that we're sort of going through a bit of a cycle, which I think has a lot of thematic relationship between the topics. The topics, as always, the purview, curated, brought up, maintained with excellence in documentation and reference forms with the inestimable Dr. Doug Reed. How you doing, man? Happy Easter, bro.
Yeah, happy Easter. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Just the weather here is a little crazy right now, so if I drop out again, I apologize, but I can't control what the wind is doing, and the wind is wicked out there today.
You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows, said a guy from Minnesota named Zimmerman, I think, at one point, but could be wrong. Folk singers, right? They kind of tend to exaggerate and tell tall tales. Anywho, so tell us what we're talking about here and why we're talking about it. And this particular topic originates from back in September 2023. And
Yes.
What was going on? I'd be interested to know what that point in time has to say relative to why we're doing it, besides just the notes were sitting there and use them for that purpose. If there's any other significance to it than that, my friend.
Yeah, the topic today is loss and grief in education, because that's something that it's traumatic and it barely gets discussed. And I came up with this in September 2023 because you had mentioned somebody in your doctoral cohort passed away.
Oh, okay, if I may.
Yeah.
Folks, this is a great opportunity for me to shout out my awesome colleague and friend, just one of the greatest people I had the privilege to know while she was alive, Dr. Kathleen Bradshaw. She completed, we both ended up getting the EdTech, EdD through University of Calgary. We were part of the same cohort. She died of natural causes. That was the pronouncement, although at a very young age and very suddenly. This was what was noted publicly. I hadn't been in touch with her for about a year, and I realize now, just on the timeline, it's because she had passed away, right? So again, just somebody's not posting on Facebook, so anyway, shout out to Kathleen. I have all kinds of things to say about Kathleen, all kinds of collaborations. There's stuff that we worked on in terms of writing projects that I could put it out now, and it would, I think, grab people's attention for good reasons. We co-authored stuff just as friends, not even within the academic realm. We wrote like science fiction-y kind of shit together, which if I look at it now, it's like, that's pretty legit. Anyway, sorry, again, you gave me the opportunity to shout out one of my favorite people. Rest in power, Kathleen. I hope you are listening or are capable of enjoying this. So again, pal, besides referencing my awesome former colleague, was there anything more to it than that?
Yeah, with the environment that we're in right now,
yeah.
if you take a look at the academic year, this is the time when post-secondary students are basically wrapping up the year, and some of them are graduating and you never get to see them again.
It's true.
And it's an ending. And so that ending is part of it. And on top of that, the Canadian federal government made changes to their immigration policies about a year and a half, 2 years ago. To me, I know that for the last several decades, public funding of post-secondaries has been reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced. I know that back in the late 60s, somewhere between 80 and 90% of all the money at a university or college came from the province or the federal government. And I know now that number is 52, 32, like the percentages are way smaller. And what institutions have done for these last few decades is they've grabbed more, they've invited more international students in, charged them more, and used them as cash cows to make up the difference.
I thought that's what I said. That's not what I said.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm being more succinct, I think. That's all.
Camtasia, edit point. Doug, please continue. You got this awesome reference, Johnson and Jackson from 2005. Did you want to speak to that? I noticed that's from a journal, an international journal of palliative nursing. We don't have too many nursing references in our collective literature on the show. Looks like a good one, bud. Why don't you speak to that?
Yeah. I just want to hop back one more second to the reduction of international students, because a bunch of post-secondaries across the country are now facing loss where there's not enough money, so they're cutting programs.
Great.
So you have people that have put their heart and souls into things and their careers into things, and suddenly that job just doesn't exist anymore.
Yep.
And that's a reality that Johnson and Jackson 2005 bring up when they're talking about learning about loss and suffering and death. And one thing they talk about is that the arts and humanities matter in a way that they need to be used as a teaching and learning strategy, because it will help facilitate reflection. Because a lot of these programs, especially in the trades training and in a lot of colleges, people have to take that art course, right? Whatever that arts course, they have to take that English or the communications course or the mandatory computer course or whatever, and everything else is so focused at the future career path. So to actually bring it back and say, no, we got to reflect on this, because loss is going to happen in your life, and it's going to happen in your career, and we need to get people ready for that.
If I may, Doug, I think you're speaking to emotional literacy.
Very.
I'm an English teacher. I'm a communications media nerd. So everything always to me is just like, what's the communication applicability here? And to me, emotional literacy, bro, that's significant to be able to understand your own, to have meta awareness at the feeling or emotional level, so you can sort of proceed in a way that makes sense and still respect the feelings for what they are. Does that make sense, bro?
Yeah, that really does.
That's what I heard you saying. I wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that really happening? Like, this was 20 years ago. 2005 was 20 years ago. I'm not seeing in the curriculums that I'm connected with more of
Bro?
this.
You want to talk about going back 20 years? I'm having a flashback to my original go round with undergrad. I was taking kind of a patchwork of electives just to kind of get through my year. I knew I was going to get in honors, but I was like, I'm just going to get through and get the degree. So whatever. Religious studies class, death and dying. Here's the punchline. I took death and dying, and it changed my life. But that was the name of the class. It was taught by Alexandra Bain, this awesome religious studies prof at St. Thomas University. She's one of the people who remembered me well enough because I took a couple of her other classes as well, just because she seemed nice and intelligent, and she's just like, she's. I took death and dying, and it changed my life. Sorry, bro. That's what I got. You carry on. She gave me a reference to get into my BEd. She was one of those people. Very nice person. Thank you, Alexandra Bain. If you ever check this out, Dr. Bain. Yeah.
And it's kudos to St. Thomas University for doing that, for having that there.
Oh man, yeah. Anyway, I got in touch with somebody through my internet shenanigans who, among other things, besides being like a rock music fan like I am, he is a legit educational person in Europe. He's an American guy doing educational stuff over in Europe. And he talked about, he said St. Thomas University. He was like, he scoped my profile. And he's like, that's a good school. I'm like, yeah. I don't know how he knew that, but it's just this person I met, this educator person living in Europe, runs like the Replacements fan club, one of them. And I just like, oh, well, let's check in, just say, hey, I like the Replacements a lot too. And, I knew the guy was an educator, but I didn't know outside of that. Gave a very brief rundown of the thing. And so shout out to St. Thomas University in Fredericton, New Brunswick, I suppose. One of the places I went. So if you do degrees at different places, are all of them your alma mater? What do you know about the alma mater? What's the how do you apply that to one place or? Doug, do you know?
Technically, it's your first place.
Well, in that case, here's my alma mater.
Yeah. The definition that the first one is the actual alma mater, and the rest.
Because then I got two institutions outside of that, but okay. That's rocking.
Yeah.
All right.
So part of what this is looking at for me is with some of the cuts that are happening, we have a program at my institution that needs to be reworked, right? There's some stuff missing. It's just not working. So I went and checked 13 other institutions across Canada with what they're doing. And a whole bunch of them are like, nope, we just canceled that program.
Aww.
And it's watching this whole important sector of society. And it's like, okay, where are people going to get trained to do this job? This is not a job AI can take over for. So what are we going to do here?
You have made such a hugely awesome point that if you want, or if you have concerns about the capabilities of generative AI encroaching on, educational capability, a really good way to limit that is, in fact, to reduce cuts and, in fact, enhance, to correct for past cuts in the humanities and arts, because that's the products that come out of those, to speak educational lingo, are more difficult to reproduce through an AI capability. And as well, it gives people the literacy and cultural agency to better understand those applications and the like, as they arise. So I think what you're talking to there is significant, my friend.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it matters. With some jobs, right? Yeah, let's use AI to do whatever, but people need to have the skill to do the troubleshooting and the checking.
Well, and
In
to
the
speak
next
to
generation, if they don't have to learn it, they don't know it. And then we've
well,
got other voices.
you made a really good point when we did the last episode about just how lack of terminology affects educational outcomes, and never is there more lack of clarity in any phenomena that I've encountered in the educational sphere than with what AI even is, right? We
Yeah.
because what you've just described in some ways you go, well, what's the difference between an AI application and something that does algorithmic stuff? What's the difference between it's just, and again, there's just a lot of people struggle just with basic traditional functional literacy. And so that's how it becomes imperative that people get a little bit more aware just of how, like, the technology basis for the internet, for instance. Not very many people know just the basic technology behind the internet in a real way. I mean, and how people use certain visual tricks on square and rectangular shaped screens of different sizes to basically get you to make a monetized decision either by accident or by being guided towards it with just really short algorithmic prompts. And I can speak to that stuff more, but that would take us kind of adjacent to what we're doing here. Does any of that have relative sense to the what we're just? Hope that didn't take us too far off the path there, my friend.
I'm going to bring it back to the path and talk about the next article, the 2013 Counselor Ed article by Dottie Horn, Cruz, and Harrowwood.
Awesome.
And this is more pointed because this is a counseling journal, and this is about teaching counselors. But some of their points are just fantastic, and I'm a sucker for a good dot-pointed list.
I noticed it as soon as we.
Yes.
Awesome bullet list.
That's I love that stuff. I like
tables and bullet points, folks. We love our tables. We love our bullet points. That's anybody scoping the notes for the first time upon the significant and impactful collection of documentation that Doug has come up with will readily note among the visual ephemera, the visual clutter, as he calls it. I prefer other terms because I think it's better than clutter. You'll notice as well a strong affinity for compact forms of communication as much as we can. Bullet points, a well-plotted plot graph, I dare say, even, right? A bar graph. Yeah. We just love these traditional visual forms because, quite frankly, they help keep your whole media enterprise academically valid. Just my thoughts on it, right? I love how everything Doug does makes this enterprise academically legit, and then I can just kind of let the monkeys out creatively, like, okay, website time, okay. It's just, thanks again for everything you've done, Doug. It means a lot, bro. Okay, bro. So speaking to the Daughtry Horn, that's what the
2013.
Yeah.
Dottie Horn et al. They talk about how there's minimal research relating to grief and loss education in the counseling field and other helping professions. And teachers are helping professionals. And they talk about things like the need for increased openness with constructs of death, increased understanding of people's beliefs in death, a reduction in people's fear of death. And it's crazy that it's still 12 years later, it's still a taboo subject. We're still not going to do it. You got to take that course 20 years ago, and that's fantastic, but I bet you are in the minority. I bet less than 1% of people would take a course like that at some point in their post-secondary.
Well, it just goes back to the fact that in Canada, we've done a really good job I think, of making the access point for pretty much any higher education you want to do financially accessible, again, for a domestic student, right? Just for your basic person who's here, natural born, whatever. I'm not differentiating. But again, right, like 10 to 15,000 a year for a full year of tuition and associated services. That's an astonishingly good deal compared to the United Kingdom. That's an astonishingly good deal compared to the United States. And again, right, like if you want your place to be like an incubator for talent and innovation and get the smart people wanting to come, then yeah, people who are going to like work engineering and high tech and healthcare, pharmaceutical, those are where we get a lot of our immigrants, those high specialized, hard to find sectors. Every GP that I've had since I moved back to Canada has been from another country. A young person in another country just opening up shopping for a family practice. And again, right, affordable healthcare, or free / highly affordable vis-a-vis healthcare, taxpayer dollar, and then fucking sensible pricing on friggin' educational services at the post-secondary level. Yeah, it does lead to people being, I don't know, more economically and culturally viable across your thing. Again, like for people looking at the outside in, it's not rocket science. See what I did there? It's not rocket. Elon Musk and his rockets to blow up. Hope that was clear.
Oh anyway. Yeah, I didn't get that at all.
Sorry, bro. And the rockets of females that went up there, right, just this past week, the private spacecraft. It's a cultural moment, Doug. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah. I just.
Nah, bro. We're on to it.
Yeah, when I was in undergrad, I ran a residence.
Nice.
In my final year, I was the Don or the residence coordinator or whatever the term was. And one of the things I was responsible for was the mental health of everybody in the residence. So here I am, 22 years old, and they're like, "Yeah, you have to take a suicide intervention workshop," and I was like, "I don't want to." And they're like, "Too bad."
Well, your parents were teachers, and you went and did it anyway.
Well, I didn't have an option, right?
If you wanted to keep a job, you didn't have an option.
Right. And I enjoyed a whole bunch of the stuff about the job.
Well, there you go. So,
but one of the things they said, one of the things that really stuck with me is if you think somebody might be suicidal, ask them. People that are suicidal will tell you.
Bro?
They will tell you if they have a plan. Nobody hides it.
I took suicide first aid training at Thompson Rivers University during the last 7 or 8 months that I was there. You know how many people gave a fuck at that institution? I don't know either. It probably wasn't a very high number based on the number of people who reviewed my thing. That's all. Because what you're saying now, like, I'm just like, yeah, like it takes me back to, I don't know, 3 or 6 hours of Pro-D that I did at a publicly funded institution in BC where they do have an opioid crisis and they do have people suffering severe mental health crises, often in combination with that. And so leading to a, I don't know, disproportionate homelessness and drug situation in BC, unlike anywhere else I've seen in Canada. We can speak more to that or not. I hope that is aligning a bit with what you're talking about here, my friend.
Well, I look at when I was in grade 9,
yeah,
a classmate and a friend of mine, his name was Leland Krillman, he died just before he got on the bus one morning. And it was just, so we went to school because the school bus driver saw it happen and then picked us up because the school driver finished, the bus driver finished the route and then took us to school. And that teacher, like I remember the teacher, he was a good guy and he was like, what do I do? Like this was never in any of my training. How do I deal with this? what's going on? And it was just, how do you deal with this? When I was a teacher, there was one of our students got hit by a car in a crosswalk. She didn't die, thankfully, but it was still, that got announced at, there was some kind of big school-wide assembly. And in the middle of it, it's like, oh, so-and-so got hit by a car. She's in the hospital. Please send your thoughts and prayers. And it's like, as an educator, I'm responsible for my students.
Okay.
I have no clue. What am I supposed to say?
Well, first of all, it's really on the nose what you're saying. I certainly think that any educator who is sort of encountering these kinds of situations, you have to sort of know what your own response is as a human, and then sort of respond accordingly. So our pal Marcus Aurelius has this notion where, you sort of process what's going on in the moment. You are permitted to act out of, you make a bad move out of stress, but then it lands at what's sort of referred to as the command center. It hits your rational capability, and then your rational capability, absent the immediate, issue, inflammation, can then sort of make the best move forward under the circumstances. And so having resources associated to that with onboarding, student mental health and wellness onboarding should definitely be funded. And I think it isn't in about anywhere that I've worked as an onboarding thing.
Yeah, and it's just, my goodness, like, what are we doing? Another time with the school I was at, I had a crew of students, and they were nice kids. And 3 years later, so I had them in grade 5, so this is when they were in grade 8, it was a car accident. Suddenly, 3 of them are dead. So they'd be in grade 8, and I know I did nothing to help my students, because most of the students didn't know them, right? They're that much older. The kids maybe knew them a little bit in the community, but I don't know what that grade 8 teacher did. But you tell me that wouldn't be a shock to the system? Like, what?
Well, again, I think you're right. And I think a lot of what you're describing, even if you haven't experienced it directly, again, speaking as somebody who lives in Canada, we got winter a lot in this country, and we have people who travel for hockey and other kinds of sports in hazardous conditions in the winter. Yeah. And it's just like, taking the Trans-Canada Highway under dicey conditions, wherever you are, or, whatever. This is something that you described, intensely personal, right? We have stories out of New Brunswick, out of a group of kids who got killed on a sports trip. And I won't go into it now because it's absolutely heartbreaking, and I just don't want to, speak to it without the specific details. I may put a paragraph to it in the notes. But again, right? I'm a dad, I'm a parent. I know what the horror of that would be. I don't, and I never want to. But it's just the worst thing that could possibly happen, and you have to make yourself get through it, because what other choice do you have? And it's a story that I think lands for, a lot of people. I think can relate to that, Doug. So good call. Good call. Yeah.
My final article is from 2019. It's Afafi and Christie, and it's Facing Loss, the Pedagogy of Death.
There's only 3 articles. I'm not calling you down. There's usually more. There's only 3. That's fine. Okay. Good stuff.
Yeah. And one of the things they say is loss, impermanence, and death are facts of life difficult to face squarely. And another thing they say is we do our best to dodge thoughts about loss, impermanence, and death, and current globalizing cultural supports colludes in our evasiveness. It is completely acceptable to not think about it.
Well, I'll tell you now, just because you're putting me on the thinking of it. Doug, thank you. One of the Stoic books that I've enjoyed and have referenced on the show, actually, contemporaneously, when I read it about a year and a half ago at this point, maybe closer to 2 years, is How to Die written by Seneca, who himself ended up being ordered to commit suicide while in exile for falling against the whims of the dictator who replaced his benefactor. A lot more to it than that. I'm simplifying the historical narrative there grossly, but it's an amazing book. It's really, really like the Stoic thinking on death is actually really helpful. If you want to demystify it, if you want to like just look at it sort of as a to not live in its thrall as a negative phenomenon, the Stoics' expression of it, particularly with Marcus Aurelius, because I've shut him out, have certainly done a lot to advance my thinking since I've sort of encountered it over the past couple of years. Never miss an opportunity here to shout out Marcus in the show. Sorry, folks.
Nope, that's right.
Yep.
So we get rewarded for not thinking about it.
Very much so.
I didn't. There was one of those getting ready for retirement meetings that HR puts on once a year or twice a year, right?
Yeah.
For the people that are thinking about, oh yeah, are we ready to retire? A friend of mine went, and I said, oh man, I wanted to go. I had a meeting, it was conflicting, I couldn't go. And she just looked at me and she said, do you have a will? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, you are ahead of 98% of the population. She goes,
I don't have a will.
She
I have
said
two
there was
kids, and I don't, and I should have a will, and I don't. It's retarded.
Yeah, I have. She said there was 50 people in the room, and she said 2 of them had a will, and that's where I got the 98% from. So we're at 96, but same difference.
That's good.
They said the first thing you have to do is get a will. You have to talk about this. You have to write this down, because if you don't do it, what the heck? What's going on?
Prince died without a will. The purple musician from Minnesota, he died without a will, and it's left the estate. It did. They tightened it up, but it can cause. Yeah, it's something that like anybody can forget about. I'll bet you anybody listening to this, probably like 90% or more of people listening to this or watching this video don't have a will. Whether it's 6 people or 50 people who check this out.
I remember I turned 18 and driving to university, right? Because Acadia was an hour and a half, 2 hours from where I grew up. And on a drive, my parents, like I'm sitting in the back seat, my parents are at the front seat, and they're like, we have to have a conversation with you. They're like, we need to talk about if we die. And I'm like, what? I'm 18.
It's going to be practically, it's going to be a practical cluster bunk, and you need to know how to navigate that cluster bunk.
And that's it. It's you have siblings that aren't 18 yet, so you're going to be their guardian if we die. And it's like, I don't want to talk about this. And they're like, we don't care.
It will take over. It's an administrative burden to die. My God.
Oh yeah. It definitely is, but it's having the conversations, even though it's not socially acceptable.
Oh yeah.
Or socially appropriate.
You have to stand up. Yeah. It's again, I like where you're going here. I think it speaks again really nicely to the Stoic notion of sort of if you're living mindfully, if you're living well, if you're sort of putting your best, thing forward where you can and the ways that you can, then I mean, death as a sort of emanation from a wider universal nature isn't something to be rationally afraid of. But I mean, again, you have to kind of get used to living with that thought. You have to get used to living with that notion a bit before, it can sort of take hold in any operational kind of way. I mean, I'm not saying that's the best way. I'm just saying it's how it's working for me. And I think there may be some applicability there for other people. But, Seneca and Marcus know a thing or two about a thing or two, I guess is what I'm really saying.
Yes. And how do we bring that into the rest of education, right? Like, how do we talk to people that have, I know somebody whose program got cut last week or 2 weeks ago, and it was
how do we process trauma across institutions and to people's benefits generally?
Yeah, it's my goal in life is to help people, right? That's what I have tried to do my entire life. And how do I help this person? Right? Is it one of those empty, sorry for your loss, thoughts and prayers, right? That thoughts and prayers thing drives me bonkers. But is there anything practical I can do other than saying, hey, if you need something, let me know? And where does that fit in an educational context? And I just wanted to bring that up.
Awesome. Well, again, I don't think I can improve or add to that with anything I would say, except that that's a good one. And thank you for that, Doug. So I guess now we're into the visuals aspect of the show, which, repeat, listeners and or viewers may know is a very strong component here, where Doug has gone through he calls it digital clutter. I think of it as digital awesomeness, and brought up only the best curated memes and other ephemera. So what else? So what here specifically do you want to get on?
I have a couple, and there's one. If you go to the website, the analogue-trope.ca/podcast, it's a cartoon done called Poorly Drawn Lines, and it's little animals. And basically, it's a bird talking to a mouse saying, "Hey, mouse, what's wrong? Nothing." And then the bird saying, "Something's wrong. What's going on? What's going on?" He's hiding something. And then snail says, "What's he hiding? Drugs?" And it's like, "Nope, emotions." And it's the gasp that, how dare you have emotions? It's just.
Can I borrow a feeling? It's very, very poignant. Yeah.
It really is. I was previously married. I was married at 23, separated by 25, divorced at 27. So I had that going on in my life. And afterwards, I was visiting my parents one time, and my father asked a question, and I answered. He's like, "Oh, why do you still care about that?" And it's like, well, she's a huge part of my life. I love her, even though I don't like her anymore. And
well, that's
and he's like, "Well, why? Why don't you just shut that down?" It's like, because I have emotions. I'm a human being with emotions. I'm allowed to have emotions. And then my mom walked in the room, and it's like, "What? Are we talking about emotions in this house?" She was, "I'm all for it. Let's talk about emotions." Then my brother walked in. He wanted to talk about emotions. But it was just, emotions are there. We have them. We're human beings. We are not rocks. We aren't like.
Well, as part of the strong orientation in the show, which we have had since the beginning of the show, towards mental health and wellness, we are strong proponents of this in how we present and in all aspects of how we do everything about the show. If it's not in alignment with health and wellness for us, then we don't do it, and therefore that's where it comes from. Anybody who's checking this out should know this. We're explicitly talking about it, and we have explicitly talked about it throughout the show, and this is just another good example of that. So appreciate that, Doug. Thank you.
So there's other pictures there. People can go to the website and take a look if they want, but they're basically all in the same gist. It's we're a community. No person is an island, that sort of thing. And I have more. I got three last things: the word, question, and phrase of the podcast. The word of the podcast is loss, because we mentioned loss a few times, and a lot of what we talked about was loss. The question is, how can education help with the loss of important people in educators' lives? And I think we talked a little bit about it, but I think we've only skimmed the surface. And especially when the literature is still saying there's a gap there. Why doesn't somebody try to fill in that gap? That sounds like some nice postdoctor. That's some nice doctoral research to dig into that stuff. It may not be very fun, but you could definitely look into it. And phrase of the podcast was, Seneca knows what he's talking about.
I just love the Stoic writers so much, because anytime I get like any inflated sense of my own personhood or self, again, right? Like I've been sort of doing this kind of ridiculous, kind of semi-legit, mostly ridiculous social media kind of maneuvering, mostly to draw attention to some very legit writing and cultural enterprises. But I mean, we spend so much time, and so anytime like I might be getting an attention or rep off of it, like, oh, you got like a famous musician or a famous filmmaker or whatever in your friends list, which I mean, again, that's just Facebook doing what it does, right? The Facebook algorithm. And if you know how to manipulate the algorithm, which I do, then those kind of results are really, it's you're not special. It's just math. Right? That's it. It's just, jacking the algorithm. And I don't have more to say about than that. But the point is, with the Stoic stuff, it's like, oh, you know X, Y, or Z person associated with whatever high profile, entertainment. It's just like, I'm just going to step back in to my basic principles and find my, veritable calmness, right? Because that's what Marcus talked about. And after such repose, I'm just back in business, right? You don't let attention to something. I mean, Marcus was the emperor of Rome. He was the most famous person of his era. If anybody knew somebody who was in a distant place, they were going to know about him. He lived under that, and he just saw himself as being the world's hardest working, bureaucrat. And then at night, he kind of got into his own stuff, right? Which it wasn't chasing women, it wasn't drinking. He wrote his meditations and sort of tried to better himself. A lot of people didn't do that, including his son. And he's just kind of one person who did. And so, again, anytime I get a sense of my own stature or inflated sense or of anything, since I've encountered that book, I'm just like, this really is a good checkpoint for me. So Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, it's all there, man. I did not expect the Stoic stuff to be as much a part of this for me with this episode as it was. Thank you for that opportunity there, Doug. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, man. So do we have anything else here, or are we done with this particular one?
We are done with this particular one.
Okie doke. Well, as part of the stunt production, which was kind of referenced earlier, we're going to take a 10-minute transitionary sort of thing. We'll be back with different T-shirts, possibly, maybe, trying to get you queued up here using some show business jargon, costume changes and the like. Bye for now. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.